Sam Seder, Emma Vigeland on the Majority Report. It's a pleasure to welcome to the program Jessica Burbank, a investigative journalist and contributor to Drop Site News. And Jessica, thanks for coming on. You've written a piece and did a hour-long documentary on Flock, and specifically how it had to deal with a town in Westchester County up in just outside of New York City. But this is something that we've been hearing from our listeners happening all across the country. A lot of this going on in Colorado, in Denver, I should say, in Washington State. This is happening all across the country. What is Flock?
So thanks for having me. Hello, Majority Report. Flock is a $7.5 billion company, which is crazy. They grew extremely big through securing government contracts largely behind closed doors. And what they do is they produce license plate readers, live view cameras, sort of surveillance technology. And they sell this to police departments and say this will help you solve crime. But really what they offer is not just this like AI powered license plate reading technology. They offer a network of license plate reading technology across the entire country that is searchable and usable by whatever law enforcement signs a contract with them.
So, and this is happening on like a municipal level, or is it happening on a state level, or both?
It's crazy. It's municipal. So you would think that mass surveillance coming to America would be this thing that Congress has to vote on, and there would be heated debate and people would talk about it on the nightly news. Not at all. It's a police chief comes to a city council, whatever municipal body you have. In the case of Scarsdale, it was the village board. And they usually through quiet consent agendas, where it's lumped in with a sum of what's supposed to be non-controversial policy items, routine stuff. And they say, yeah, we would like to have $60,000. In the case of Scarsdale, it was over $1 million to implement license plate reading cameras all over town. And the town board typically votes these through without any public notice, any debate, without it even being an agenda item.
I mean, the fact that this is Scarsdale, for people that are outside of New York, I would be hard-pressed to think of a wealthier, more affluent suburb in New York State. It's kind of notorious for that. Were you trying to highlight Scarsdale for a particular reason on that front? I know you highlighted other communities in your piece as well, but the fact that it's there, too, I think says a lot.
Yeah, I grew up not far away from Scarsdale in Stamford, Connecticut. My dad's a contractor. And he said, you know, Scarsdale is this crazy rich town. And it's so wealthy that they ship such expensive rock and landscaping in that it's a part of the village code that you can't ship any of it out without a special permit. That's the kind of money we're talking about here. And I had a friend in town, Josh Frankel, who's in the documentary and quoted a lot in the piece. We'd worked together before, and he was messaging me like every day. It's so crazy what's happening here with this Flock stuff. We're getting these license plate readers. It's mass surveillance. And finally, one day I got on the phone with him and he explained it. And I did an online search, you know, what's going on with Flock. There was hardly anything, like no coverage. So how does a mass surveillance company that's $7 billion in size with funding from Andreessen Horowitz and Founders Fund, Peter Thiel money, how is it this big with no mainstream coverage? And so I immediately knew there was a story here, but I got lucky that I knew someone in a town where this was happening live. And we could catch the village board as they tried to bury this. I talked to Flock on the phone and they agreed to a recorded interview. Now, no one at Flock will talk to me. They're very secretive, but it was a really lucky turn of events. And Scarsdale was perfect because there were so many people in town, including people like Charles Seif, who are NSA, former employees. They're really aware of what this technology can do. So it was lucky that it was an affluent town where people had time to show up and fight this, which might not be the case in a working class town.
I'm looking at a website, banishbigbrother.com/flock camera map, and it's nuts. There are so many of these all around the country, and it definitely feels like this was the strategy. We can go in and be a lot quieter about this and a lot more successful in going city by city rather than going on a federal level to do this. But what's the pitch? Like, I mean, I don't know, I know Scarsdale by reputation, but is there that much crime there that somebody on the city council is going like, oh yeah, we need to have like all of this? Is it like, how are they securing these contracts where I would imagine municipalities are like, we don't have a lot of money to throw around necessarily, unless you're like, in the midst of some type of like crazy crime spree. I can't even see how this would be entertained.
Scarsdale's a famously safe town. Their main crimes are petty larceny and identity theft. Not things that these cameras are going to solve. I mean, the petty theft was, the neighborhoods are so safe that people were told by the village board at one point, stop locking your keys in your car. So license plate readers aren't going to solve these kinds of crimes. So why was it that they needed 172 surveillance cameras in a town like Scarsdale? The money was not in the village budget. It was expected to come from a federal grant, which didn't end up coming through. But Flock goes and meets directly with the police chief. And I think the pitch is simple. Just if you have these cameras, you're not going to have to devote as much resources and personnel to solving crimes because you can track people wherever they're going. You have a body of evidence here, which is a major Fourth Amendment concern. You're supposed to have probable cause before you're doing a search and seizure of evidence on someone. So this is persistent surveillance that is constantly collecting information, whether or not someone's committed a crime. And when I went into Scarsdale to cover the story, there were a lot of people in the area, and I grew up nearby. It's the same all over the tri-state, where there's a lot of people who are landscapers who are from other countries. And there were a lot of people who came to the village board and said, 404 Media has reported that they're giving this data to ICE so that they can track immigration cases and track people they're suspecting of being illegal immigrants that they want to take. They've also used this data to track people getting abortions across state lines. So it's not so much about Scarsdale. It's about establishing a national network in case someone happens to drive through Scarsdale that they want data on.
But the national network piece, I think, is important, right? Like the fact that these local municipal police departments don't have to go through a process of, say, collaborating with X county to pursue a specific case essentially makes it so that there's kind of this like privatized, almost federal surveillance aspect that can be tapped into legally by these municipal police departments. I mean, that's fairly unprecedented, I would imagine. Also because, like, say if you were to collaborate with the federal government and they had that kind of information, that would be a more formal process too.
Yeah, absolutely. And they've now started to sort of pivot how they establish their camera network and grow their camera network. They have 5,000 cameras cameras in 5,000 communities. It's over 88,000 cameras in 49 states. So they're already all over the place. But because now people are starting to push back at the municipal level, they started this thing called the Thriving Cities Fund, where they pay for private businesses to put their cameras on their property. So what does it mean for our democracy if those cameras are street view facing and then law enforcement gets access to them through Flock directly or the private business? So that's what we're dealing with, is they're amorphous. They're willing to use any avenue to put their cameras up. What does it mean in terms of antitrust law if they're going to pay for their own expansion as a company to put cameras everywhere? Anyone can buy license plate reading cameras. But what Flock offers that's unique, I would say, is the national network that you can track people across state lines, wherever they happen to go.
let's talk about that national network, but I also want to get to that sort of like no bid process that you'd covered
Yeah.
in Scarsdale, because that seems important to me too. But do we have a sense of how networked these are throughout the communities? Like, I mean, obviously within the context of the community, all the cameras are networked, but has Flock begun to build a national database that would allow for the feds just to be sitting in DC and sort of tracking somebody going from, you know, I don't know, from New England to Arizona or something?
So we know because there have been cases of this happening. In the case of Johnson County, Texas, a sheriff was able to search the 88,000 camera network because they subscribe to this model where if they share their data with other Flock municipalities, they get access to search those cameras. And so they were tracking a woman who crossed state lines to receive an abortion. This became a major case. They searched cameras in states like Illinois, where abortion is legal, to prosecute this case. So what does that really mean? I mean, we know that ICE has accessed these cameras before. There's been cases in Westchester County, actually, where federal officials access the data. And when Flock is questioned about this, you know, are you collaborating with the federal government? They say, well, it's not our data. The data belongs to the towns. So what happens if they get a subpoena? They give a really unclear answer, where they say, well, Scarsdale, we'll let you know that we've gotten the subpoena so you can protect yourself. And maybe you can ask us if you don't want us to fulfill the subpoena for the data with the federal government. But we deal with this on a case-by-case basis. So they answer like a politician, even at a time when they were pitching Scarsdale for the contract. And the village board was asking these very specific questions around who owns the data, can the federal government access it? They were given indirect answers. And Scarsdale still ended up authorizing the contract. So that's what we're dealing with here, is a lot of municipalities that are totally fine with accepting the potential consequences of now the federal government has a mass surveillance network they can access with whatever subpoena they can get.
And there was an angle about competitive bidding as well for this stuff. Tell us about that, because I mean, I think it's probably, I'm just a little jaundiced when I think about this, but it sounds to me like a bunch of police chiefs are getting kickbacks. Like, and I like,
Well, more bang
Chief,
for your buck. Yeah.
Chief Anderson, you know, will explain the technology to you on a 5-day junket to Bermuda or something.
It feels like that. I mean, Chief Del Bene in Scarsdale was not the police chief when he started communicating with Flock. The first day he was appointed as police chief was the 14th of January. On January 15th, he was exchanging emails with a Flock representative to begin drafting up this contract. He didn't officially take office until the 1st of February. So what's going on here? He wasn't even the official police chief of the town. So you really wonder, yeah, what's at play? What's in it for him? There is a revolving door between people in law enforcement and people who end up working for Flock. How much of a salary bump are they getting if they end up signing a contract before they go on to take a job at Flock? I've asked, the Flock communications director about this directly. And she said, this is entirely above board. Law enforcement officers have really good backgrounds and their experience serves them well at Flock. And so it's very suspicious. I don't know what's really going on, but you're supposed to have a request for proposals from a lot of different surveillance technology companies if you want to adopt a multi-million-dollar contract because you want to get the best deal. You want to make sure you're picking the best technology. That didn't happen here, and it didn't happen in a lot of other cases where Flock sends a sole source justification letter, which says you don't need to do a competitive bidding process because we're the only company that offers this technology. So that's not true. Motorola has AI-powered license plate reading technology, but they don't have the national network that's established. So that really has to be the selling point. And the same sole source justification letter that was in possession in Scarsdale has been sent and then posted publicly in municipalities across the country. So it seems pretty clear that they have a model for doing this without public input, without recognition, with as little accountability as possible.
And that's where I think some of the antitrust liability lies there. Outside of applying antitrust issues, I guess, on that, theoretically a different DOJ or a different FTC could bring, are there other, is this in any way regulated by like states, or are there federal regulations, or is this just something that's like, it sort of feels a little bit like when Uber first started. They just would come in and create facts on the ground, essentially, and then just apologize later.
Yeah, we all really miss Lena Khan right now. But I think in the case of Norfolk, Virginia, the Institute of Justice is funding a lot of lawsuits around Fourth Amendment concerns. So people who say the cameras block me in my neighborhood, I can't leave without being on one of these cameras. You shouldn't be collecting evidence on me if I haven't been convicted of a crime. And so it's been approached from that perspective legally, something people are doing to sort of waste law enforcement's time and make the cameras not worth it to have, is do a ton of FOIL or FOIA requests for whenever they drive past a flock camera to get access to that data. And the courts have ruled that people are allowed to have access to those public records. It's not protected by any sort of laws. Scarsdale has tried to say that it would be a risk to public safety because we're investigating active crimes. So I don't know if the cartel of the Suns has roots in Scarsdale or what that's supposed to mean, but it sounds like that's not going to hold up in court and that people really do have access to these records. So I'm happy to see it's got people with money willing to sue the government over Fourth Amendment concerns. And Eugene, Oregon is another place where they're pushing back against this pretty hard from some other angles. They've gotten several towns, including Scarsdale, to cancel their contracts altogether. So it's heading in the right direction, I think, now.
Jessica Burbank, investigative journalist, contributor to Dropsite News. We'll put a link to both your YouTube documentary on this and the piece you've written. Really appreciate you coming on and talking about it.
Thanks, y'all. Thanks for having me.
Thanks so much.
Hey, folks, don't forget to hit the subscribe button and check out our daily show. We do it every day at 12 p.m. Eastern for about 2.5 hours. We even take phone calls. You should check that out.